Hi everyone, I'm very happy to have Joe Private with me over here today. And I'll let Joe introduce you and I'll talk about the crazy stuff about how we connected with each other. It's really crazy.
Hey everyone, Joe Previtt here. Zell, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's definitely a crazy story, which I'm excited for us to kind of dive into. Yeah, a little bit about my background. So I'm an open source TypeScript engineer. I work at a startup called Coder, which is basically remote development environments for teams. So we build a platform that's open source, and I work on part of the product. I work on maintaining an open source project called Code Server, which is VS Code in the browser. So it's basically like code spaces. Um, I guess some other stuff that I do on the side. I do some indie hacking, so some side project stuff. I run a job board, a talent collective. I also create courses. I've got a Vim for VS Code course, and I'm working on a TypeScript course, which I'm hoping we'll dive into as well.
And to add on to that, Joe does a lot of stuff, right? He's also an 8-hit instructor as well, and he creates a lot of free courses over there. So if you are a 8-hit subscriber, a lot of them are actually free. So you can look at 8-hit and go through some of Joe's courses. And at this point, let's bring it back into the crazy story. I do want to talk about Vim. I do want to talk about TypeScript because
Oh
those are
yeah.
things I have completely no clue about. And perhaps people listening to this would be interested in hearing as well. But let's talk about our crazy way of meeting each other. Would you like to fill in the honors?
Yeah. Oh, totally. So, okay. So I guess the first thing I should say, Zell, is like, I learned how to code years ago, like almost about 5, 6 years ago through Free Code Camp. And I don't know if I like saw you in the community or like somebody recommended your JavaScript articles. But I have like I recognize your brand, your face, like your courses, your materials. And so, I'm pretty sure I used a lot of your resources when I was first learning JavaScript. And so I don't know if we hadn't connected on Twitter yet, or for whatever reason, but I, long story short, I bought a Moonlander keyboard the other day, and I was looking up like, oh, like how do I do my layout? Because there's like so many options.
So in case
And
anybody doesn't know, the Moonlander keyboard looks like this.
yes, it's a beautiful split keyboard, programmable. Um, Probably one of the best ones out there, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, but you have this like fantastic, like very lengthy Moonlander post about like you buying one, your layout, um, why, like how to set it up, how to use it. Like it's like probably the go-to article, I would say, for like Moonlander noobs like myself. Um, Anyways, I found it, and I had like kind of memorized like the title or whatever, and I was Googling it on another device, and I looked and I accidentally clicked on the wrong result. And it turns out somebody with like bad intentions had like completely plagiarized your article and like just like literally word for word, like images too, posted it on their blog. And I was like, dude, this isn't cool. And so I found you on Twitter, messaged you, and that kind of kicked off the conversation.
Yeah, so that's how we started connecting with each other, with a plagiarized article somewhere. How crazy is that?
And the crazy thing too, like we were looking at our messages, like my first message was, hey Zell, did I message you from another account about your blog posts? And you're like, what were you thinking when you got that?
I was like, hang on, what is this person talking about?
Right.
Because I was at a point where I was following you, I heard your name on Twitter, and then you weren't some random dude. So I was like, wait, something is here. Something is here. I have no idea what's happening, but let me not ignore this guy, all right? I try not to ignore people, but sometimes when I get overwhelmed with work, I do like go silent mode here and there.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what the hell is happening?
You're like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Because I gave no context. I was like, I don't know what I was thinking. Because I was like, well, Well, if he already saw my message, like now I'm spamming him. And if he hasn't, I'll just tell him after. And so anyways, yeah.
And
So then I was like,
the other problem
yeah.
is I don't know what your other account is. You never mention it.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well, so oh yeah, so the story there's I I made a separate Twitter account for like practicing Spanish, like just tweeting in Spanish to practice. And so I didn't know if I was logged in on that account when I messaged you.
Cool. Yeah. So
Which I didn't, right?
yeah, and so basically, what Joe did was you messaged me, and then I was like, "Holy shit! This person actually did plagiarize my article. Let me figure out what I'm about." And you know what's the funny part? I searched the
Yeah.
article, and then all the
Yeah.
links actually point back
Yeah.
to mine. So even at the end of the article, there's this tweet about this article thing, right? That
Yeah.
link also
Yeah.
pointed back to me as a Twitter handle.
So do they like they didn't even bother to update that part,
No, I
basically?
don't think they did.
And it's funny, like I just clicked on the link now and like the blog is down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yay.
that's awesome. Yeah. I
That's
mean,
awesome. I have no idea why. I
I know,
didn't.
right? Yeah, I didn't. I figure because I remember we were trying to figure out how we could like report it or contact the author and say like, hey, this isn't cool, but we couldn't figure it out.
Yeah,
So,
I couldn't figure it out, so I decided to stop doing that. Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, that was the crazy story of how we connected. Like, so I don't know why I'm sharing this. Maybe the moral of the story is, you don't know when connections begin, so be open to anything, I guess.
Dude, well, it makes me think of I think the term is called Friendcatcher, and I think it's by Patrick McKenzie, like Patio 11. I think that's what it's called. But like it's kind of this idea, or maybe Swix coined it. Here we go. Yeah, okay. So Swix. So if you type in friend catcher on Google, and I'll send you a link for the show notes. But so he says a friend catcher is something you offer for free that helps you catch friends in your sleep. So you put all this work into creating this Moonlander post. You wrote it for free, like I can read it for free. And while you were quote unquote sleeping, you kind of like caught me as a friend, So it's like, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The funny thing was I was writing that article for a friend because he was like,
Yeah.
don't know, he didn't really know whether he was getting the Moonlander. I'm like, why the hell would I write a Moonlander article when probably nobody here is interested in Moonlander, right? So I guess
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm at a point where I just want to write what I want to. And then I just wrote it. So there was a point where I started not writing what I wanted to, and then that really caused me to become demoralized. And that was one article I was like, whew, it was worth writing it.
Yeah, dude. Well, look, and I mean, I'm sure there's tons of other people who like haven't connected yet who have read it and benefited, and you just don't know. But it's like, that's the cool thing. Like, maybe in a year, someone else ends up on this show from the article.
Yeah, so the cool thing is I've gotten a few guests here before you're like a few, or just a few, like you're probably the fifth one or so at this point. And then I'm like, oh, hang on, wait, this person said that they knew me before. I'm like, sure, what? This person said they knew you. What? I have no idea what the hell. As in, I've been so holed up in my part of the world, in my own man cave, that I have no idea what my stuff is doing out there. Like I have no idea how people view me as a person. So that is like I'm disconnected with the world in that sense. So I'm like trying to connect back at this point by getting on the show with people like you, and having conversations rather than sitting behind my blog and continuing to type, right? Because the funny thing is, if you type on Twitter, for example, you can get followers and that sort of creates a kind of impression. But if you do a blog, it sometimes becomes a very lonely journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many articles do you have? And like, how did you kind of just, how did you make it a habit and get past the like loneliness of blogging? Because like you've done it a lot, obviously.
I got stopped after a while, to be honest.
Yeah.
So what I did was there was a period of time where I wanted to write like 52 articles a year, so 1 article a week. So I
Okay.
kind of saw that in some sort of like entrepreneurial thing that you have to be consistent. Like I tried hard at doing it for a while, but I couldn't really do it. So when I went full time into my business, where I decided to stop freelancing and started writing courses, books at that point, not courses yet. I decided to, let's try doing 52 articles, 1 article a week. And then at some point I go like, let's double that. Let's do 1 article and 1 video a week. And I'm like, I got burnt out by that.
I can
And
imagine,
well,
dude.
stuff happened.
Yeah. I mean, did you end up doing the 1 article and the 1 video for a while?
I think I ended up doing there was a review blog post that I read recently, and I think I did 34 videos and 52 articles. So, not really 52, but maybe 48 or 49. Because when I sell my Learn JavaScript course at that point, I do stop writing for that 2 weeks or so. So like
Gotcha.
probably about 48 articles and 34 videos in one of the years. I'm like, holy shit. There are people who are putting a lot more out there than me. Like Kevin Powell has 3 videos a week. I'm like crazy.
Yeah.
I have no idea how he does it.
I don't know.
I
Some
don't know.
people.
So
Some people are nuts.
he's good at what he does, right? So that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting how that catches friends, because I've, in a way, when I asked people for a conversation, I was expecting to get rejected a lot.
Really?
Yeah, because sort of like story of my life, right? Because I don't really get along well with people that much, and I prefer to be alone. And when I try to connect with people, they seem friendly. Like if we do a normal meetup conversation face to face, they seem friendly. But I couldn't really hit up deeper with most folks. And even in my life, right, that's kind of like something like that. And so like when I was trying to do all of this, it's crazy that like people would just be okay with jumping on a call with me for like 1 hour without any like, and the topic is so open-ended, right? It's like, oh, maybe we're sharing some of your stuff, maybe we're talking about some random thing that, like from a random dude from somewhere over the internet that maybe you have not seen. So I'm like, I was expecting many people to not come to conversation with me because I'm like a random dude on a stranger on the internet. Right? But at some point, I'm also like, maybe I should give it a try, because some people probably know me somewhere, like I no idea, but let's give it a try and maybe prove myself wrong in a way where I am not good enough and all that stuff, which is also a story of my life. So working through that publicly in a way. So which is interesting, because that links me. We're dragging away from the conversation of like Vim and TypeScript, but we'll get back to that. But
That's okay.
It links me back into this thing where I live stream in the past, right? There was this period, and this like live streaming is awesome. Live stream coding is awesome for anyone who's trying to get into jobs and they are facing problems with interviews. Because you have to figure out how to get over your fear of someone watching you code at that moment. And when you practice enough, then you have no fear during the interview. Yay! And well, it's not like I did go for interviews afterwards, because I'm like, I don't really want to get a job. So, but I realized that helps with that. And then I think after that, I started, I don't know, I started live coding more. Like a recent workshop that I'm doing called Build and Deploy. It's 8 sessions, and all 8 sessions are live codes.
Ooh, okay.
Completely from scratch. I'm coding everything from scratch to teach you how to use Astro, the static site generator.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Astro and 11T, and then I'm going to wire up to Sanity at a later stage. So it's like crazy how I'm able to do that because I live coded for like 4 or 5 times.
Yes. Well, you build up the confidence, right? You make the mistakes on life. Like with like coding on live stream, right? Like when you get stuck and you have to Google something, or like you just don't know what you're doing, like everyone's watching you. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I feel like the nice part is like when you first start live coding, you probably only have what, 1, 2, 3 watchers. So the bar is low, I guess.
Yeah. So like the bar is quite high for me because I'm like I
Yeah.
send it to my email list, which is like 20,000 people.
Mhm.
Not everyone turn up, of course. Like a few, I think
Yeah.
probably 14 people turn up. I'm like,
Okay. Right. You're like, well, can you imagine? I guess like if you were like sitting in a classroom, like in person, you had 14 people, like that feels like a full room.
yeah. So well,
So
so just a tip that came up randomly as we were
yeah,
talking. So, yeah, cool.
yeah,
Let's go back into TypeScript and Vim, right? So let's talk about
mm,
TypeScript because I think a lot of people have questions about TypeScript since it's so
yeah,
popular, and many
yeah.
people are asking me, when would someone choose to use TypeScript, and is it important, to become hired as a developer? At which point in the career stages would it become important, and
Mm.
why?
Those are great questions. I think, I mean, so it's interesting, right? Like when I think, I guess the first thing we can talk about is like, do you need it for a job, right? And so where I am, like in the States, like um, most of the web front end positions that I see, TypeScript is in the stack. And so one of the like indie hacker projects I run is a job board, and it's it's very seldom, or I guess it's seldom that I don't see TypeScript in the like stack for the role that they're hiring. So, you know, I if we're not there today, I would say, within the next 2 to 3 years, I imagine it's going to be in at like 99% of job postings.
Wow.
Um, that's just my guess, just like where we're trending. Um, that's just based on what I've seen.
And just for because we're talking about indie hackers, right? Are the job boards
Yeah.
mostly from startups, or what kind of companies are there? Because if you're talking about like 90%, it could also be because it is a very specific group of people, and like,
Yeah.
all enterprises are still using Java and .NET and stuff like that. So if we were to, zoom up and look at the overall ecosystem of all possible
Mhm.
jobs out there, how much percentage would you give to TypeScript?
Good question. So I think, yeah, that's a great question. So let me give a few examples. So let's say, for example, today's Wednesday. Yesterday, I was recording a podcast with an engineer at Stripe. Stripe just migrated 5 million lines of code, like the Stripe dashboard, um, to TypeScript.
Wow.
So a company like Stripe, a company like that at that size, they're using TypeScript, right? Um, I work at Coder. We're 30 people, Series B. Um, we we've always used TypeScript as far as I know, ever since I've been there, almost 2 years. Um, and then my friend just got a job through the job board, kind of. He's joining a 6-person startup. They're like, pre-seed or Series A or whatever, probably pre-seed. And they use TypeScript in their stack. So there's 3 examples. Again, I chose the ones that, were top of mind. But all of those levels are using TypeScript.
Yeah, understand where you're coming from as well. I do know that TypeScript is gaining a lot of speed, and it's definitely worth investing in. So
Yeah.
when should someone, let's say in their career, um, if we go from a beginner's approach to things, because sometimes it might be a bit too much for beginners, when should
Yeah.
they begin to learn TypeScript, in your opinion?
Mm, that's a great question. And maybe we should I want to get your take too, because right, so like TypeScript it's basically syntax for types for JavaScript, right? um so it's interesting because I've definitely seen Twitter conversations about it. Like, let's say you have somebody who wants to learn how to code. Do you put them into TypeScript, or do you put them into JavaScript and then TypeScript? And my argument would probably be JavaScript first, because like that's what TypeScript is compiling down to. Um, well, but then you could argue that it's like a compilation target. I don't know. I feel like I still would probably learn JavaScript first. And then once you feel comfortable with JavaScript, like you've built a couple applications or projects, look into TypeScript. Um, they've got like a 5-minute intro in the docs. And see what you think, see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to know though, like how do you know when you've mastered JavaScript? Or how
I,
do you know,
I don't think you need to master JavaScript, like from my opinion. So
yeah,
I'm at a point where I don't use TypeScript, right? You're at a point where you use TypeScript and you're proficient in it. So we're coming from two different angles. So whoever is
That's true.
listening to this and want to hear about this, you also have to understand our perspective on things and where we are standing,
Yeah.
right? Because for me, my development is really about teaching people how to go from scratch to something good enough. And at this point, what I have done is to teach the basics, the foundations, and I'm a big fan of the foundational stuff because once you know the foundations, you can practically pick anything up. So I had this interesting story where I had a testimonial from someone recently, and we talked about it. He was going through my JavaScript course, and it's a big course. He was about halfway through, right? And then he got forced into a circumstance where he had to find a job. So what happened was, and the job required a view, which I don't teach. And what happened was he was able to read a bit, clobber things up, like go skip ahead to like async JavaScript and stuff like that, come back, read the view documentations and clobber something up in 1.5 days. And he managed to get the job without anyone knowing that he did not know Vue.
That's amazing.
I mean, how crazy is that, right?
That's mind blowing. I mean, and see, like, that's all you could ever want as an instructor, right? I mean,
Definitely.
you want to empower them.
He had this thing where he had this confidence about him as a developer, and he did not have that in like 6 months before. And he was able to tell me that if you know the foundations here, you can practically master any language you want to, because everything else is just like derivatives on top of it. That's my
Right.
version of it, my spin of it, or my paraphrasing of it. But he didn't really say it that way, but he did say that it's not hard to master, to learn any of these frameworks. And you can be surprised, which I am like totally clueless about because I have not worked in a company much. I'm always my solo person. And he said that you can be surprised at how many intermediate developers actually don't understand JavaScript. And that's why they're having problems learning the frameworks that help to propel them. And I'm like, hang on, wait, what? Because to me, when it comes to learning, you have to get the foundations right in order to progress, right? If your foundations are not right, I'm like, how do you even go there? And so anyway, long story short, a lot of people are doing intermediate developers are doing frameworks, and then they go, okay, I don't know what to do. Let me seek help. But that guy who took my JavaScript course is going like, oh, let me Google a few things, and then I know what to do. And I'm like, it's crazy also because I'm like in such a silo myself, like I talked about, right? I don't even know like my JavaScript course, like the extent of the value that is like, and someone going through halfway is like, I'm set for life as a developer. Come on, bring it on.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree that foundation is key. And it's like why, like if a friend says, "Hey Joe, I want to learn how to code," I wouldn't say go learn React, because React is so reliant upon JavaScript, that if you don't have those foundations, like as soon as you're out of React, you're going to feel stuck and helpless. And so I completely agree that like foundation is key.
Yeah, I also agree with that. I had this cute analogy that if you
Yeah.
are, I wrote it in JavaScript roadmap. So if you're learning React, it's kind of like you're driving an F1 race car without a driver's license.
Yeah.
So that's my cute
That's a
analogy.
great That's a great analogy. That's funny. Okay. And so going off of that, when people talk about TypeScript, one that I saw on Twitter that I liked was um, using JavaScript is like driving without car lanes, like lane lines. So yeah, you can go fast, you might run into someone, but when you add TypeScript, you might stay in your lane. You might be a little safer.
Yeah, that is a good analogy as well. And I do see the need for TypeScript when it comes to building. So let's talk about the why, right? I do see a
Mhm.
need for TypeScript when you're collaborating with many people. So in my naive thinking, because I haven't really gone into it, maybe you can talk to me about it and see whether that's correct, is
Yeah.
that if you are building an application, a relatively complex one, if you're building one
Mhm.
of those, maybe TypeScript is helpful. If you are building an app within a team of, say, at least 3 to 4 people and above, TypeScript is going to be helpful. But anything
Mhm.
below that, you probably don't need that.
Mhm.
And when it
Yeah,
comes
I
to
mean,
front end, I have no idea at this point. Like TypeScript seems to be compiling stuff. That's all. I'm like, I have no idea how TypeScript interacts with the DOM, which I don't think it does. That's
oh
back
yeah,
to
yeah.
basic JavaScript, right? So which is why
Right.
JavaScript is important before TypeScript.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think it really depends, right? Like I'm so biased because I can't remember the last time somebody asked on Twitter, like I think it was Kent C. Dodds, and he was like, "When was the last time you wrote JavaScript?" And like, for me, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, like
Wow.
because just because like when I got a job, a couple jobs ago, I joined an agency and TypeScript was part of the default stack. And like, um, it's kind of like a habit, right? Like it just became more natural. And so because I was so used to it and the features of it, right? Like the autocomplete, the IntelliSense, or the extra, or well, I guess it's the same thing. The autocomplete, um, the like self-documenting code, right? Having like parameter type annotations, knowing like, okay, this function accepts 2 arguments. First is a number, second is a string. It returns a promise of a string or something. Um, so, just thinking that way, like it's kind of a paradigm shift. And so once that became normal to me, then I was like, okay, I want this. I'm going to keep using it. So any new project at work, side projects became TypeScript. So, um, it's hard, like, again, I'm super biased, so it's hard to say, uh, but I do think you get some of those benefits, even if you work as a solo developer. Some people just might feel more comfortable sticking
Mhm.
to JavaScript, right? Like I think it comes down to a comfort thing when it's just you. It's like, are you going to move faster in JavaScript and you feel more comfortable? Yeah, then maybe you should use that.
Well, that becomes a it's like a chicken and egg question because if you don't start TypeScript, you'll never
Yeah,
know
yeah.
whether you'll be comfortable in TypeScript.
True, true, true. Which is why, like, and I'm sure you say this to people too, when they're like, hey, what front end framework should I learn? And you're like, well, go try Vue, go try React and see what you like.
For me, it's pick one and go.
But okay, okay. There you go.
I mean, that's what I
Easier.
say, but essentially what
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
do personally as well is what you did. I tried Angular before I tried React. I kind of tried Vue. And the one I
yeah.
am enamored with right now is Svelte. I haven't really
Oh, okay.
dove into Svelte because it looks so clean, right? And
Yeah.
the whole reason why I took up Astro is because you can try any framework.
I know. It's so nice.
It's like so amazing to me. And it is a static site
Yeah.
thing, which I have heavily invested in. And I have no idea why I invested in it so much, because maybe because of the performance thing. Like I never thought that, because I came from a WordPress background, right? And then I'm starting to think about WordPress and how database caching, that's an extra layer that hits the performance. And you have to start doing like, caching on the database and some memoization. It starts to get really, really complex. So I decided very early on that I will slim it down to static sites. And
Yeah.
the crazy part is, at that point, I'm so reluctant to learning new languages. It's like, I don't know whether this is a problem with me, but it's funny, right? That
Yeah.
I'm so reluctant to learn new languages that I actually took Gulp, which is like the development workflow thing, and then I clobbered together a static site generator with Gulp. It's like hacky and it kind of works,
Yeah.
but there was a point in time where JavaScript static site generators were not as popular.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool, I got my own static site generator. Yay. And at
Yeah.
some point, 11T came out. I was like, oh yeah, 11T is so much better than what I could have done, because, well, I spend most of my time writing anyway and not that kind of coding. So I swapped over to 11T. And then now I'm like,
Mhm.
oh shit, Astro looks even better than 11T. Let me jump ship. So so the funny thing is I took a jump ship, and oh yeah,
Yeah.
which brings me to this thing that I recently created but didn't really push. And it's something I call a Saturday hobby project.
A what?
A Saturday hobby project. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like you are always working, especially as
Oh,
an
dude.
entrepreneur,
Yeah.
right? You're kind of always on your job. And at some point, you go to a point where you feel guilty for doing stuff that is not your job, because there's so many things to be done. And what I did basically was, okay, let me try and enjoy at least 1.5 hours of my time on a Saturday dedicated to anything I want to do as a project. So that was the point in time where I started, okay, let me try Astro again, because I kind of tried it and it wasn't ready back then, a year ago,
Mhm.
and tried it again. And I was like, holy shit, this is so good. And then that became built and deployed in 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh. No way.
Yeah, so I was like doing 2 or 3 sessions of 1.5 hours, messing
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
with like how to build a blog with Astro, and then that became like okay, let me do a 8 session workshop on this.
Dude, that is awesome. I rebuilt my site with Astro a couple months back, and it was a lot of fun to work in.
Yeah,
So I think people are gonna like it.
yep. Circling back into TypeScript, I think we have a conclusion there.
Yeah.
But before we talk about it, as in before we end off, I also like to point out that at some point in my development career, development journey, I also realized that I wanted something to tell me, what is the property that I given to this object over here, and that is where TypeScript shines, right?
Yeah.
Once you have something that is kind of robust enough, to me, it's like, oh man, I forgot about it. And
Yeah.
that is the point where I go like, maybe I should learn TypeScript. So I think this perspective may also help someone who is listening to this. And
Yeah. And
yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say, one other thing too is like, I know some like, let's say, like TypeScript skeptics out there are like, oh yeah, like it slows me down, I don't need it. um I'm pretty sure with JS doc you can get some type information, at least some autocomplete, like especially if you're using a modern editor like VSCode. um so that could, that could get part of the way for anyone out there who wants to, like, you're nervous about trying TypeScript but you want to see what you might be missing out on.
Yeah, that's what I'm currently doing. So I'm doing
Oh yeah.
documentations with JS doc. At least syntax, I have not really gone into being good at JS doc yet, but at least I know that,
Yeah.
oh, if I look at this, I know what type it is. Is it supposed to be a string? Is it supposed to be a number, an object? If it's an object, what other things are in there? So things like that. And I'm starting to develop a kind of coding style that doesn't really require TypeScript in a way. So I'm like, oh, maybe I don't need TypeScript. I don't know. Like it depends again on the people you're working with. So the environment matters.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, with that, let's wrap up TypeScript because I think it's enough information for people to go chill on at this point.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
let's talk about something else. And yeah, I'm being aware of time. La la la. Let's talk about Vim, right? Like I'm like,
Okay.
so many people are talking about Vim. I'm like, tell me more about what you find great in Vim because you wrote a course on it, like
Yeah.
it's I think a 22 lesson course so far.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's yeah, I can. So I wrote a course. It's called Vim for VS Code. And it's a hands-on course. So basically it's over 120 exercises. So like they're like short exercises to teach you the different commands in Vim, like the basics. Um, and yeah, like the thing that kind of sold me on Vim was one, a lot of the people I look up to in the JavaScript world know Vim or use Vim. But I was like, I don't know if I want to go like full in on Vim. Like I like a lot of the features of VS Code. So can I get the powers of Vim inside VS Code? And turns out you can.
So what are the powers of Vim inside VS Code? Like what's the difference between just writing in a normal VS Code editor versus using Vim in VS Code?
Yeah. So basically, I like to think of it like keyboard shortcuts, right? So VS Code has native keyboard shortcuts. Sublime, most editors do. So what you can do is add an extension that gives you Vim key bindings. So what that means is like when you're in the workbench editing a file, you can basically jump around the file, make changes quickly with different keystrokes. So like my favorite one, right, is for example like CI and then quotes, which is basically like change inside quotes. So like you hit these three keys and like boom, you're inside the quotes. You can start typing, you can make the changes, you can hit escape and then go back and start navigating the file. So like there's these quick keyboard combinations, these movements that you can combine or motions, and you can make changes very quickly. You could do the same thing for like, hey, delete everything inside this function block. Like if you're writing a function, delete this line. Like there's, all these motions that you can combine and you can just make these changes very quickly. And like, you just don't have to touch your mouse. It's kind of beautiful.
Sounds great. I do the same thing, but in VS Code directly. So there's
Okay.
this thing like there's this thing called auto jump. Or was it not? Sorry, auto jump is the terminal one. I got it mixed up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Something similar to
Yeah.
easy jump or something like that, where you can hit a key
Oh, okay. Yeah,
shortcut
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
type a few characters, one or two, and then the letters will change, and you can type a letter to jump to that cursor. So something similar to that, right? And I think
Yeah.
there's this shortcut, this extension called expand region, where you can press, I think, Command E. I don't really use it often. You can press Command E to expand from the quotes to like say the brackets to whatever the line to the function, depending on what it is. So a couple of presses, you can delete the entire function if you want to.
Oh,
So
that's
things
cool.
like that as well. And what I
Yeah.
typically do is, well, I do the basic mouse thing like shift,
Yeah. Yeah.
select, delete, forget it.
Yeah.
Simple. I like things to be simple sometimes, but those
Totally, totally, totally.
shortcuts are things that I use as well. Like
Yeah.
the funny thing is, I'm not too sure if you saw an article a long time ago where I wrote about how I changed my VS Code keyboard shortcuts. Right. So for
No, 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 I
example,
didn't see.
I have this thing where I like to do like dual screens when I
Yeah.
go to. So I have a keyboard shortcut that pulls the tab into two. So I got like
Oh,
and then I got two screens to work with. There's a keyboard shortcut to go on this panel, the tab here, there's this panel, and then there's the tab here and stuff like that.
oh, that's
And I
like the split
completely,
view.
yeah, the split view, and I completely
Yeah,
changed
yeah,
the
yeah.
shortcuts to match that.
Mm,
Then like with Moonlander, so here's an extra tip for Moonlander, right? I have a
yeah.
hotkey that does that.
Oh, that's
I kind of
nice.
go like this. Like I press, I think this button, which
Yeah,
my normal one. Oh wait, I can't remember. Yeah, this one plus
yeah.
somewhere here, which is my right arrow, and then it goes to the right.
That's nice.
And then if I press say Command 2, which is the tab thing, Command 1, 2, 3. If I press alternate or option 1 and 2, it switches between the first split view or the second split view or the third split view. So I can navigate anywhere without a mouse. And of course, you can do that with the terminal. And I switch the
Yeah.
terminal keyboard shortcut such that when I press Command D, it opens up a split terminal instead of
Oh,
whatever
that's nice.
that thing is. So like it's written in such a way where, because I got that before Moonlander, so I customized it for a Mac. And I had a Windows version as well because I was testing with Windows at that point in time too.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
There was this point I was like, let me sync up the two of them together, and then I go like, forget it, because I don't use the Windows much after a while. So that got me to a point like when you are in the terminal, you can override the commands in such a way where, say, option 1 or command 1 only taps between the terminal and not the ones above, and then you can close the terminal. Then that same keyboard shortcuts goes into the different panes.
Oh, that's great. Like I feel like when you're able to customize all those shortcuts and find your like ideal workflow, like that's when things feel good.
I think that's why the Moonlander article is so like popular,
Yeah.
maybe amazing in a way, because I shared a lot about how I created those shortcuts based on my preferences, based on how my fingers work. Like I only press space on my left arm, so there's no need for space on the right arm, and yada yada yada, things like that.
Yep.
But it makes you start to be aware of what do you actually do, and use your shortcuts rather than the shortcuts used by other people, which may not map directly into your brain.
Right.
So like to me, is sometimes there's no need to train what other people do. You train what you do, if you can. Like, but if it's Vim, then yeah, go and learn it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There are some things that are popular and they are universal, so that becomes a language that you can piggyback on. But if you are not into it, then well, go ahead and make everything on your own. And that brings me back into Richard Feynman. Yeah, so he had this thing. I don't think I ever shared this thing before. He had this story. So I was reading the book. He had this story where he would cook up symbols or languages that he uses himself when he was young. Soon he realizes that the entire world doesn't use it, so he kind of like swapped over. But the key important thing is you start creating your own language for things, and that's when your mastery or your learning actually begins to go deeper beyond what other people use as words, for example. And we can bring that beyond code, for like, say, let's keep at the code, because if you bring beyond code, it might be a bit too much sometimes.
Sure.
Encapsulation is a pretty big word, right? And many people like to use that. But when I was like researching on it for Learn JavaScript, I'm like, hang on, it means 3 different things.
Yeah.
And people just got confused because it means 3 different things, right?
Yeah.
And so things like that, you have to start breaking things up, right? And the funny thing is like higher order functions. Oh, that sounds so cool and so amazing. It's just a function, a function that can be passed into another function. Okay, move on. And like callbacks. Okay, that's a function that is used in another function. Okay, move on.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So like people make this thing so complicated and confusing, but
I
there's
know.
very easy way to understand about things. And I think that's what I also like about your courses. Like I was reading through the pages and I'm like, you like to cut through the fluff. I like to cut through the fluff too. So I'm like, yeah.
We get it. You get it.
Yep.
We get it. Exactly. Well, because we got it. Like, I mean, it's like, yeah, higher order functions, like closures, like the word in itself, it's like blah, like doesn't mean anything, or like scopes and like, yeah, I mean, but on the bright side, there's like room, I guess, in the ecosystem or a need in the ecosystem for people who can break it down into a way that's easier to understand. Some people just make sense, but other people's like probably people like me and you, like the language that the traditional like technical language just doesn't translate.
Like I had to talk about scope. Like I think I wrote it in CSS tricks before. It's like a reflected a glass that you can reflect. Like because like goes in and then there's this bouncing off effect on a glass. At some level, you go like this. How many layers are there? That's like
That's
the
a
reflection.
great like that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Like my strength is coming up with analogies like that. Somehow. F1 race
Yeah.
car.
You're right. Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah. So like I think that also speaks about how we learn.
Yeah.
Like maybe you and I we don't really buy into the fancy technical terms, and then we prefer to break down the terms into something that we understand. And I think that's a very powerful skill in learning while you're building, because you are not taking a piece of whatever it is or thing for what it is, but you're actually breaking it down into, okay, what is it actually? So that goes into something similar to first principles, to really understand what that is. And well, I never thought about first principles that way, but it is if you look in this angle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard that mentioned the other day. How would you define or describe first principles for someone who's not familiar?
Wow. I haven't really gone into it because a large part of me didn't believe that I was doing first principle stuff, but
Yeah.
right, in a way. So
Yeah.
I guess it's something where you look at something that is universally true and not subjectively true. I mean, or rather, truth, not personal subjective truth, but truths that can be upheld in the laws of nature. Or if you're talking about in humanity, then perhaps truths that can be upheld in the laws of human as a social creature. So that applies to more towards conversations, like what are kinds of patterns that actually work, kinds of questions you can ask, kinds of questions you cannot ask, what are the principles inside the conversation, which can be found, not easy, but they can be found. And yeah, I've been learning about this recently as well. So that's like a cute thing. Then like if you're talking about objects, then what's the compositional blocks that make up the object?
Okay.
And there's some level where you kind of like, okay, that's not enough for me, and that's fine. So the fun thing about this is I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson, so the astrophysicist, and I was listening to his masterclass, and he was talking about 3 different kinds of truth, or rather like truth in 3 different examples, and one where people are looking for Mercury, and it wasn't there, and it was like, is Newton's gravity laws not working on us? Is it failing on us? And then it was like Mercury was like, hang on, we were looking for something similar to that. So and then they found it. So Newton's laws worked. And they were looking for Pluto, and then Newton's laws didn't work. Right. And then what happened was I think they went and did some calculations or whatever stuff, and then they're like, hey, that's that. And maybe then can't remember. Let me try to recall the story, so I can't fully remember, right?
No worries.
So one of the idea is one of them was an observational fault. Oh, Neptune was an observational fault. So they were looking for Neptune. They couldn't find it. Even when they found it, it wasn't behaving supposedly to the trajectory that was supposed to be there. And then they had 3 observatories. One of those had an observational fault. But if we remove that bad data, then the thing aligns. So Neptune followed the laws of Newton. So
Okay.
they found Neptune that way. And then when they tried to find, there was some other planet, before Mars or something. I can't remember what the name was. I think they called it Vulcan back then. There should be a Vulcan here because Mars was behaving erratically or something like that. And then they tried searching for it and they couldn't find a planet no matter how hard they searched. Then what happened was years went by and then the theory of relativity came in. And then that replaced the Newtonian gravity physics. And that what happened was that theory of relativity actually fit into the entire the explanation of why Mars was behaving that way, and then everybody stopped believing in Vulcan at that point. So
Wow.
what I'm driving at is that there are truths to deeper layers of truths. It's you can think about it as deeper layers of truths, but I think it's more powerful to think of it as this is a truth, this is another layer of truth, this is another layer of truth, and another layer of truth. And in certain circumstances, certain truths don't work because the factors have changed. So like there are layers, expanding layers of truths.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm like, oh yeah, mind blown.
Right, exactly. Oh man.
Yeah. Wait, why are we talking about physics?
I asked if you could explain first principles.
Uh,
So yeah.
and also if we talk about first principles, there are things that you experience but you can't explain. And if many people experience the same thing but they can't explain that, then
Yeah.
something must be there. If it's also measured by a meter as a scientific reading, then something must be there. Like ghosts and paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
Meters actually do twitch. There is a scientific recording. We can either ignore it and believe that there is nothing there, which is not aligned to the truth of what is going on, or we can say, hang on, there's something here, I just don't understand it. And try with that you begin maybe let me try and figure out more, so you don't close yourself off to things that are already present as a fact in front of you. So that's kind of how I don't have a good answer to it, but it's like
Yeah.
examples.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, keeping an open mind, like being curious, wanting to know more.
Yeah. So like, yeah, that's a cool conversation. I have no idea how we went here.
I don't know. I forgot how we got
We
there.
were talking about Richard Feynman.
There you go. That's
Yeah,
why.
That's why. Directly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. That's cool. So I think at this point, I kind of want to ask about your story as a developer. We went like super far away, but I kind of want to know too, like how do you start out as a developer and the trajectory that you went in to get to where you are? Because to me, as a personal thing, I like hearing other people's stories. And
Yeah.
perhaps whoever who is listening here, I have no idea if anyone is listening anyway, may be interested in how to get to a position like yours. And that may be something that connects to that. So I kind of wanted to ask the story if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I guess I can start. I went to college here in the States in Arizona. I studied foreign languages like Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. And yeah, originally I thought I wanted to like try and go like, get a PhD and try and teach foreign language education. And I started a master's program in Italian. And about 6 months in, I was starting to question it. I was like, I don't know if I'll, at least in the US, it's hard to get a job as a professor. Most people will get their PhD and then they're like an adjunct professor. So they work part-time at a university. Maybe they give a couple classes per semester, and then they work part-time at the community college. And like with those two jobs, they have just enough to like support themselves. And, especially with linguistics, it's not like every university is, rushing to hire a linguistics professor. So the money, like the financial stability or support, I guess, the freedom to choose where you want to live, those kinds of things had me questioning this path. And so during winter break, I had gotten some like surgery. So I was just kind of on the couch, couldn't do much. And I started researching other careers, and tech had come up. And I had been familiar like with startups and all that. I'd read some books and like done some stuff. I found Free Code Camp as a free alternative to like paying for expensive boot camps. And so I signed up, started teaching myself, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do 100 days of code, see if I like it, and if I do, I'll drop out of college, like grad school, and pursue this.
Wow.
And so, after like 30 days, I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is a superpower, being able to write code, build things, make my own life easier, make other people's lives easier. And so after I think around spring break, in my second semester. So this is like March of 2017. I told my advisor, I was like, you know what? I don't think this program is right for me. I'm going to try this coding thing. And so just to kind of put the timeline into perspective, signed up for Free Code Camp in December, started doing 100 days of code, dropped out of school in June, and got like an internship in July. So
Wow.
like seven months, very basic, like WordPress actually.
Cool.
So that was like, and at the time, so again, this is July 2017. First time getting paid to write code. They offered me $25 an hour, which I was like, that's amazing. Let's do this.
Wow. I like that. I have similar experiences to that where, for me, I was still interning in a company, and then I switched myself from an admin to a tech position. I'm like, hey, I wrote this blog, I made this WordPress site. Then my manager was like, what? Can you change the color? Yeah, so easy. Done. And then she's like, and then I started, talking about stuff that we can possibly do with code. And then eventually she hired someone to replace me.
For the intern while you became the tech?
So they were hiring some other people anyways.
Yeah.
Supposedly a designer or some other guy. And then that guy came over and took away all the admin stuff that I was doing.
That's amazing.
And I focused on code.
See, I feel like transitioning at a company that you're at, like if you work at a company and you're a non-tech role and they have tech roles, like that's probably one of the easier ways. Yeah.
So anyway, I was talking about the $25 per hour story, right? So what was common for me is that around a couple of months in, say about, I think also 5 months in, I was like, hang on, I don't really want to get a job anyway, so let me try and freelance for a living, right? Because I felt that I should probably do it for a living. If the company I'm working for hired someone at $50 an hour, and I think I can code better than them in 2 months, I should be able to do something. So that gave me the confidence to try. And what I did was, no idea where to go. So I went into this forum, that was a pilot in. Anyway, so like trying to figure things out, right? So I was like, anybody here wants a website? Let me do it for $50.
Such a good deal.
Right? And then I coded my first 2 websites for $50 each. Designed and coded it.
Dude, those people, they owe you.
And the
But I
thing,
guess it's a learning
yeah,
experience.
well, it's you have to gain that confidence and experience in
Yeah,
yourself
that's
to be
true.
able to do that, right? And one of the things I learned there was one person was really nice, one person was a pain in the ass. So I'm like, okay, I'm never charging $50 again because of that pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, back to you. Like, I just wanted to connect with you on the
No,
$25
no.
thing. This is like,
Yeah.
oh, amazing.
Yeah. But the first time you get paid, it's like amazing, right? Because like you go from not being able to do this thing to doing this thing. And so yeah, I got that job, and at the time when I first got it, it was remote because I was living in a different place. And eventually I moved to the city where the person was, the WordPress agency. And when I got there, he was like, look, I can't pay you to learn. Uh, so we got to figure something out. And so I thought about it and I said, okay, let's make a deal. Why don't I work 40 hours a week like it's full time? But half of it I'll spend learning, and then the other half you give me billable work.
Oh my God, this is the same thing I had, but slightly different.
Really?
Okay, so it was exactly 20 hours a week.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was still schooling, and then I went around in meetups, and then this guy, agency person, decided to, their front end person was leaving, and it was like, do you know SAS? I'm like, yeah, I know. And then it's like, hey, our person is leaving. Do you want to give it a try? I'm like, okay. And then we struck up a deal where, because I'm still in school, right? I did not want to leave school without my degree.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, let me do part-time. So we struck up a deal, 20 hours, I'll be working for them, 20 hours, I'll be in school.
Dude,
Exactly the
literally
same
the
kind of
same.
deal, right?
That's crazy.
Except I'm not learning on the job. I'm doing
Yeah.
all the other stuff, but similar deal.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, like the 20 hours learning, like I would either like shadow him, or I would like do a course on, Coursera, or like Linda from LinkedIn. Yeah. But anyways, that was supposed to pan out to a job, a full-time job. He didn't, because he was like, you're not where I need you to be. He made me like a really low offer. Like, at the time he said like, I can pay you. I think I wrote it down somewhere. It was like 30,000 or something. Very, very low, for at least my area. Um, like 45 probably would have been a good starting salary at the time. Um, and so this was, October 2017. I needed to like a full-time job. So, and like, I wasn't going to, he was like, you should work double the hours and I'll pay you 30. And I was like, 30,000 a year. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I found a full-time job. I applied to some coding ones. I couldn't get a job offer for that, but I got one as a digital marketing manager. So digital marketing. So like, think like MailChimp, SEO, Google ads, Facebook ads, all that jazz. And I still kept doing free code camp and building projects on the nights and weekends. And I was there for, I don't know, 5 months, before I finally got a job offer from another company to work full time as a front end engineer.
Wow.
So front end engineer, and that was March 2018.
A year
So
from when you
yeah,
started coding.
pretty much a year. Um, Especially for anyone who's listening that's like trying to figure out how, like, what's feasible, and so yeah.
And then what happened?
And then, and then so I got the full-time job as a front-end engineer. This was at a company that had maybe 15 engineers, I want to say. There was like 4 or 5 on the front end, 4 or 5 on the back end, and then we had like 4 or 5 like data. And we worked on like internal applications for the company. It was like a 200-person company. I worked there. I did Next.js, React, and and like we used styled components. I'm trying to think what else. It's just like mostly like front end stuff. We did some end-to-end testing with Cypress. And I was there for a year and 4 months. And I left that job because, I was like, hey, I want to do full stack. And like the company wasn't, they were like, oh, we do C#, like you can learn it on your own. Like I didn't really have any mentorship or a ton of support. And I also found out from other people that I was getting paid less than like market value. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to find another job. And so I got another job. I ended up joining an agency remotely. So it was my first remote job, doing full stack JavaScript development with React, TypeScript. So that's where TypeScript came in.
Uh-huh.
React Native, GraphQL, and Node. And so I took that job. That was July, or that was like June or July of like 2019. Yeah. And I loved that job. I learned a ton. The people there were really, really smart. It was a company called EchoBind. And, we built full stack apps, so web apps, mobile apps. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I ended up going to a conference called All Things Open in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is like all things open source. And there I went to a talk from a Facebook developer advocate. And pro tip here. So I went to her talk. At the end of the talk, I hung around and just talked to her, was like, oh, like, is your team hiring, all that? She's like, yeah, we are. Like, here's my card. Let me know if you want me to refer you. And like I said, I loved the job I was at. I'd only been there 6 months. So I was like, I'm not looking. But I was like, okay, why not? Like, it's Facebook. It's really hard. I'm probably not going to get it. I'll apply anyway. So I apply. She gives me a bunch of tips. It's a phone screen with the hiring manager. She was like, hey, this is in person. It's either in San Francisco or Seattle. Is that okay? In the back of my head, I'm like, no, like I'm only going to do it if it's remote. But I was like, okay, sure. I'll do it, or I'll apply. And so I go through the process. I talk to a recruiter, talk to a hiring manager, I do the phone screen, pass that, luckily. They're like, okay, we want to bring you in for an onsite. Like, okay. So they fly me out to San Francisco. Beforehand, I study on LeetCode like crazy. I'm like, big O notation, time complexity. I'm like, no idea what any of this means, but like, I'll try and bullshit my way through it. And so I go to the onsite. It's in San Francisco. Like, Facebook office is beautiful. Recruiter pulls me in. It's like an all-day thing, like a 10 to 4 or whatever. First interview was like, the first one I think was the coding one, and it was like whiteboarding, like what you imagine. A person comes in, they ask me a bunch of different questions, solve some basic algorithms. Because remember, this is a developer advocate position, so it's not as let's say coding intensive as like a UIE, like a user interface engineer role or a software engineering role. So it's a different interview loop. Do another one. I talked to like 3 or 4 other people. It's funny because there were, let's say, 5 interviews, and one of them was in person. The other 5 were like over Zoom, which is weird to fly someone out for an onsite, put them up in a hotel to do 4, like whatever. I was like, whatever. So I do it. I'm pretty sure that I bombed the coding interview. And maybe like a week later, they get back to me and I have an offer.
Cool.
And so, yeah. And I'm just like, this is crazy. And so like my wife and I go back and forth, and we end up deciding that, we'll try the Seattle thing for a year. So I take the job. This is December 2019. So like right before COVID. So I I like leave the agency. They're super excited. They were like, hey, like, you took a chance. It's Facebook. Like, you'll learn a lot. You can always come back. It's like, cool. So January 2020, I moved out to Seattle. Again, Facebook pays for the relocation and everything. I go out there. There's 2 months of training. Sorry, not 2 months of training. They put you in a hotel or in an apartment, like paid for a living for 2 months. And there's boot camp. So I do boot camp and all that. So anyways, I moved out to Seattle. For anyone who remembers, at least in the States, like Seattle was one of the first cities to kind of like get hit by COVID. And I remember like Facebook or the company that Facebook worked with that was in charge of my temporary housing, they were like, hey, we're giving out masks and hand sanitizer if you want it. And like me and my friend were like, why would we want this? Like, what do you need this for? And I was like, whatever, it's free. Like, I won't turn it down. So, they drop it off at my apartment. I remember like I had like gotten sick, and I don't know if it was COVID at the time. Like, I felt horrible. Like I wore the mask to Whole Foods, and I was the only one with a mask, and everybody looked at me like I had a disease. And it's crazy now because like we went through 2 years of wearing masks being a regular thing, and like still in many places, like wearing a mask is normal. So yeah, COVID like starts up. Like I sign a lease. My wife and I sign a lease for like 13 months for a 500 square foot studio. She moves out there 2 months later in March. They shut down the office the first week of March. We move into the apartment. It's me, my wife, 2 big golden retrievers, like 50-pound dogs. And we don't know anyone. I'm working remotely for Facebook now. I've only met like, half of my colleagues for like a couple of weeks.
Oh no.
And I'm just, and like, it's lonely, right? Like Seattle, like everything was shut down. Like like in the beginning, we were like, we rarely left the apartment. Like you step out, like anytime you leave, right? You're wearing a mask. You go to the grocery store. Like it was when we didn't really like understand COVID. And obviously there was like no vaccines and all that. And, washing down the groceries and like too afraid really to do anything. And like, you can't meet anyone. So we got pretty lonely. And, we kind of made a decision where we were like, like we would rather be stuck in Arizona around family and friends. Even if we're not like seeing them every day, better than like a 500 square foot studio. So we made the decision to end the lease. Facebook at the time was like, when we made that decision, they were like, yeah, we're not going to have people back in the office until June of 2021. Until then, you can move around. Like my manager was like, yeah, you can go to Arizona. So we moved to Arizona. And when we moved back, we really made this decision where we were like, you know what? Like Arizona's home. Like we can't afford a home in Seattle. It's too expensive. And we were at the point where we were like, we want to buy a house, settle down, and have kids. And so I made the decision to start looking for other jobs. And like, I don't know what you tell people when they're looking, but my hunch was always like, it's going to take 3 months. So I started looking in October, which was like before I hit the year mark. And like, for those who don't know, usually you have to stay at a company like a Facebook at least a year. If you leave before a year, you have to pay back a certain percentage of like sign-on bonus and relocation bonus.
Oh.
So I'm like trying to like make it to a year at least. But you know how it is. Like you apply to jobs, things move quickly. Anyways, for Coder, on LinkedIn on the right side, how it says people you might know.
I think so. I don't really use LinkedIn personally. I'm like,
Okay.
I haven't been using LinkedIn for the last 15 years, maybe.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, people listening, there's a side, it says people you might know. Anyways, Um, there's this guy who shows up and it says, Ben Potter, developer advocate at Coder. And in the DevRel space, like you get to know people quickly, right? Because it's a unique role. You're social, right? So I'm like, I don't know this guy. I don't know the company. Let's see what they're about. And so they had an opening for a TypeScript engineer to work on an open source project. And I'm like, oh, I like TypeScript. I've been writing about it on the side. I'm an open source developer advocate. So like, this seems like a good fit. So I message him and I'm like, hey, Ben, this is super random, but like I saw Coders hiring. How do you like it? And will you refer me for this position?
I love that. What you,
And he's like, hey man, like I love Coder. Like I joined a couple months ago, but he's like, I'll totally connect you to a recruiter. And so that kind of like got me through the like resume black hole, if you will. I interviewed. It was a couple different interviews, a take home. They paid me for the take home, which was pretty cool. They gave me like an Amazon gift certificate. And yeah, I got the offer. At the same time, we were buying a house. And so
wow.
I told the recruiter, I was like, hey, I'm buying a house right now. I don't want to like jeopardize that. Can you give me a week and I'll sign the offer? Like once I have the keys in my hand. I'm like, okay. So, we get the house. Because like at least in the US, there's like background checks. So like they might call Facebook and say, like, hey, does Joe still work here? So I couldn't let Facebook catch on that I was leaving. And I couldn't accept the job because I didn't, so I was in this limbo. So we get the keys. Same day I email the recruiter. I'm like, hey, I'll join Coder. And Coder, I was like, is there any way I can start in January? Because that'll be my 1 year mark. I was like, otherwise I have to pay this, bonus back and all that. And they're like, no, we need you to start in December. We have everyone. We were doing an orientation. I'm like, okay, whatever. So so first day is like December 4th. So I'm telling my manager, hey, I'm leaving Facebook, blah, blah, blah. I'm going through the like exit process. And they're like, okay, it's less than a year. The finance team is like, it's less than a year. We'll send you a spreadsheet that says how much you have to pay back of your your sign-on bonus and relocation. And mind you, like I'm like calculating numbers, trying to figure out like what's the damage going to be. And so for reference, like the relocation package was like 35 grand. So like pretty substantial. The sign-on bonus I got was like kind of wimpy. It was like 5 grand. So I'm like, okay, 40 grand. I'm like, I read the fine print of my contract. It says you have to pay a percentage back, based on how much time you left. So I'm like, okay, I'm leaving a month early. That's got to be like 5 or 10K, right? 10K max, but probably on the like 3 to 5K. I get the email, you get the spreadsheet from the finance team, and it's like an automated email. And it's like, open this up. Like, this is how much you have to pay back because you're leaving early. I open up the spreadsheet and it says 17K.
What?
And I'm like, this can't be right. This is crazy.
Wow,
And
that's a
so I
lot.
get, and I get this email on a Monday, and I'm like, my last day is Friday. Like I have to like, they're going to like shut off my email on like Thursday and all that. So I ping enough people, like they've got like a contractor who's like, nope, like I put it in the spreadsheet. That's the number. Finally get in touch. Like I get somebody on like a video call from finance, and he's like, yeah, this doesn't look right. He's like, give me 24 hours. Finally gets back to me. This is like a day before my laptop gets shut off. And he was like, yep, there's an error in the spreadsheet. Like, total's 5K.
Oh,
I was like,
oh,
oh, like sign of relief.
wow.
So, I pay the 5K, I leave Facebook, I join Coder. Coder is amazing. They give me like a $3,000 like home office budget. They've got unlimited PTO, great benefits, and I get to work on open source. And so, I joined, December 2020, and I've been there since.
Awesome. Like this is such a crazy journey. Like for most people that I spoke to so far, most of their developments in their career has been crazy. Like for mine, it's
Yeah.
crazy as well because I told you a little bit about the trajectory earlier, and
Yeah.
so I was doing like I was freelancing with agencies, hopping around because I'm a freelancer and not really in an agency. Just didn't want to get
Yeah.
that way. And a couple of months in, about so everything I did was about freelance, right? So around the time where I got the 20-hour thing, in 1 or 2 months, I got a 3K website, WordPress, from my professor. So I was
Oh.
one-on-one with him because of some project that I had to do, and then we started talking, and then I saw him on a website. A finance professor.
Oh my gosh. Should have charged him, should have said 10K.
I said 4. I
Okay.
said 4. He said, if it's 3K, we'll do. Okay, set.
Right.
It's like
Step up from 50.
the biggest amount of money I've ever seen at that time, So like as a budding freelancer with like $50 in my belt the last time around, it's like, oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
Fast forward to that, I started writing a book in about 2 years into my learning journey. So that's my first book, and it made about 2,000 US a month, and that lasted for 2 years,
A month?
Yeah, 2,000 a month with a book. I'm like, holy shit, crazy. Is this working? Can I do this for a living? Then I kind of
Yeah.
did a few other stuff. Like I wrote another book on golf. It did okay for a while, and then the trends started shifting very quickly into webpack. Like, this is dead. No more.
Yeah.
Did one on typography because I thought it would be nice, but I didn't really sell it a lot because at that time I was toying around with a lot of stuff and things are a little bit complex. I didn't like the way the complexity it is, so I didn't really push for it. So that kind of died as well. And there was a point in my life where I was earning $500 a month. So at that point, I was like, and my house is coming. I need to get a deposit soon. And I got to this point where I had a talk with my wife, and then we were like, look, if I cannot get something out within this year that can make me a decent amount of money, I'm quitting, and then I'm going to go look for a job, which I know I can look for a job anytime. Like I have no worries about finding a job, right? And then lo and behold, about 1 or 2 months in, after I told her about that, like sometimes when you decide on something, everything aligns, right? The energy aligns. I decided, let's talk about JavaScript. Because I have been writing about CSS so far. And I think that was around 2017, 2018, during the period of time where you started, right? And I was like, let's write about JavaScript because so many people are asking me about JavaScript. I'm so sick and tired of the questions that people are asking me. Because I'm like, I mean, if you're asking me about how to make something like from scratch, I'm like, okay, fine, let's make 20 things. So you will never have to worry about making something from scratch again. That became Learn JavaScript. Obviously not a very good project manager at that point in time because I thought 20 projects would be very easy to teach, but given the way I'm teaching, I explain every step of the way to get to that 20 projects, and there's no repeat projects, so which means everything has to be new, which means everything builds on top of one thing, builds on top of another thing, builds on top of another thing. And I rewrote the course a few times to facilitate the flow of learning. So for example, people teach you like variables and then functions and if else and then for loops very quickly, but you don't need for loops until much later. So I kind of like rewrote the thing,
like that.
put for loops later when you actually need it. And everything was structured that way. It's a linear course, 300 lessons. So I spent 4 years writing it. So it's like, it drained me so much because I promised myself that I will be writing this thing and only this thing until I complete it. I'm not allowed to do anything else. Bad move. Okay, bad move. That is the thing that drained me because I couldn't do anything else. Right. So that was that. And that got me 10K in a launch with nothing. So there was a pre-sale and I got 10K. I'm like, shit, now I need to do this. And then 3 months in, I was thinking 20 things in 3 months. How hard would that be? I can finish that in 3 months. Like, if you're coding, that's super easy. But it turns out that teaching how to code 20 things in 3 months is not a simple feat. So 3 months in, I was like, hang on, no, I can't do this anymore. I need to, I know this is good stuff and I need to sell it again because otherwise my livelihood would just go down and I would not be able to deliver the course. So I sold it again. It's a partially completed course. And then I was like, a few months in, I was like, okay, I'm promising maybe 3 more months I'll finish it. Obviously not a good project manager at that point in time. And I didn't learn my lesson. So I was like, 3 more months later, I'm like, so I've been suffering a lot of guilt over the last 4 years about not being able to complete Learn JavaScript. So at that point, it's kind of like a little bit of a defeat mentality. I cannot really pull off things. So I'm still recovering from it. And recently it's been getting a lot better, but I can tell you that story maybe another time. Mindful of time, we're like 1.5, I don't know, 1.5 hours at this point into this video, but let me complete this thing and then we'll call it a day or something. Okay. I'm so happy to talk about this. And then what happened was I continued selling the course every 6 months because I needed that money too. So the first time I launched it, it was $75. Second time I launched it, I had few packages because you're supposed to do that. Okay, I did that. I got 40K. Third time I did it, I got 40K. Fourth time I did it, I got 40K. Fifth time I did it, I got 40K. So there's like 6 months gap each time. So I've been living with that as my paycheck for a period of time. And then things started like dying down after COVID. So like in the last 1.5 years, I got about half or like maybe half of the amount based on revenue from what is in my mind. But the crazy thing is when I look at the stats from what is happening. So in the middle of it, I started doing 12-month packages because people are like, hey, it's too expensive. Can you do like some payment plans for us? I'm like, okay, I got a lot of that request, so let me try doing that, And for a long time, I couldn't have the sets to back it up, like what percentage of it was people joining the course and then they did not pay the full amount and all that stuff. So last January, I got the stats, like around March, I got the stats. And it's crazy. I thought I was making 40, 50K from a launch, but in actuality, when everything was done, I was only making about 20, 30.
Interesting. Where's the other 10K?
They dropped off in the middle, payment stopped. So that kind of thing happened.
Oh.
Always happens when you do a payment plan. So anyway, I tried to streamline that a little bit. I changed it to a 4-month plan and the revenue dropped from 50 to about 30. I'm like, oh shit, fuck, FML, right? So around that period of time, right, when the sales numbers actually came in, it was around 22, which is not ideal. No, definitely not ideal, right? But it also showed me that when I dropped it to 4 months, the revenue number, the actual profit that I generated is about the same. Like, okay, maybe it's the 4-month thing that's the problem. Let me extend to 6 months the next time around. So I tried that. It's kind of about the same from my brain numbers at this point. I don't have the stats right now. Like my assistant kind of decided to leave for another company, so I did not get the numbers afterwards, but it's about the same. So then I'm like, holy shit, I need to do something this year for sure. Or the last year I started writing another course called for async JavaScript, because async is very big, and I took in Learn JavaScript I had this. I only talked about front end, so I took that out and I started talking about everything, including the backends, including OAuth and all that stuff, demystifying everything in a separate package. I never really sold it, but it made me a couple of $1,000s here and there. Right. Then what is crazy then is this year, I know I needed to do something as well. I'm still writing async, and part of me was going through this same what's that called, mistake of doing one thing only. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to write it. So there's a lot of emotional struggle there. Then the Astro thing came, right? I was like, okay, Saturday
Yeah.
Halloween project, let me just play around with it. And then I decided, all right, and this is going to be a crazy revenue number. This is going to be a crazy price point, right? If you hear of
Okay.
it, you're like, no way. So what I did was 8 sessions, 8 workshop sessions, 1.5 hours each,
Okay.
$49 total.
Why so low?
Because what I was trying to do was to try to help people.
Hmm.
And let me bring that to a private session afterwards, because there are some things I am uncomfortable with revealing at this point, but maybe I'll review in future. But anyway, that made me about 7,000.
Wow.
That is pretty decent. I'm like, wow.
For a $50 price point to make, that's substantial.
I got about 100 people buying the course. So I was like, wow. Like, and what's crazy is also that maybe I should cut this out. I don't know. What's
Up to
crazy?
you. Yeah, I mean,
I'm like, okay. What's crazy is also that about half of that came from people who bought Learn JavaScript.
Oh, interesting.
It's about 10 times the price point.
Wait, Learn JavaScript is how much?
It's 495.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Half of the people were repeat buyers in a sense.
So basically you're getting close to 1,000 true fans.
No, there's like about 550, maybe 100 people.
Okay. But you're getting on the way. I mean, the repeat buyers, I guess, like the fans fans, repeat,
Yeah. So I had people who are like, you sold me into the way you write courses right now. So I've took video courses. I've always thought I like video courses, but somehow your text courses stick with me better. Made it in a way. I'm like, so yeah, that's my story so far. Like, if anyone is curious about it, and I'll leave you to draw the conclusions, because I am not very comfortable with sharing the conclusions at this point. Maybe in future I will. When these things get released, I probably will be comfortable with sharing at that point, because it will be maybe a month or so before I release this, and by that time the changes will have already been made.
Oh, well, now I'm curious.
And then when you are reading it, when you're seeing it, if you know of where I was before versus what I'm doing now, then you can see a change in what I'm trying to do. And perhaps that will fail, perhaps that will succeed. I don't know. Maybe when this thing comes on, then we see. Well, then again, we don't know who will listen to a 12-hour video thing, right? So let's.
I know, right? Yeah. Well,
right.
Dude, now I'm curious. Yeah.
All right. Okay, cool. But let's end there. Maybe we'll talk about this something else with the public. And I'll be happy to share about the results of that. So I'll be super curious to see how that goes too. So last thing, we talked about a lot of stuff. Where can people find you?
The place where I spend the most time is definitely Twitter. So I'm at JSJoeIO. So JSJoeIO. Come say hey.
G.I. Joe.
Well, you know, I know.
All right.
Dude, there's so many of those. Yeah.
All right.
Average Joe. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for being here on this show. I really had a good conversation, and I hope you enjoy it too. And everyone for staying, if you are staying.
No, Zell. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
All right. Bye-bye.